All right, so we're going to be looking at problem number 1. Now, we're working with special quadrilaterals. The special quadrilateral we're working with is the parallelogram. So it's really important, especially as we get in later problems when there's more than one type of special quadrilateral, you want to make sure that you write down what type of special quadrilateral it is. When we start looking at squares, rectangles, rhombuses, kites, trapezoids, they all have different properties. So if you don't know which type of shape you're working with, it's very hard to identify the property. So that's why we tend to use the same types of properties here. Now, when we're working with this type of problem, like you said, we want to make sure we know that this is a parallelogram. That's always our first step, is identify. So we know that this one is a, I'm just going to shorten it with p-gram, but I like parallelogram. So we have a p-gram. P-gram. That's always step 1. Step 2 is writing out the property we are going to be using. Now you'll notice we are using angles, right? And the angles are across from one another. So we will be using property of opposite angles. Can anyone tell me what the property is for opposite angles? Yes, Ivan. We know that opposite angles are congruent, so perfect. It's blank equals blank. That's all you have to do. We have to fill in the formula first. Then, as we move forward, it's just writing in the expressions. We know that 135 equals question mark. All you're doing is you're filling in the given information. We know 135. We know question mark. So it's really easy to see that our answer is just 135, which you should know already. Yes, it could. You could have it flipped as question mark equals 135. That also works. The same thing. Good question. Any other questions thus far? Not too bad, right? So let's clear this out. And we'll start looking at some more difficult ones, but I just want you guys getting used to. Soon we'll be solving. That's why we want to make sure we follow these steps. I know it seems a little excessive that we have to write in all these steps. Let's clear out our annotation. All right. Easy enough, right? Let's check out number 2. Number 2 is also quite an easy problem, but again, it's going through the process. We know this is a parallelogram. I'm not going to write parallelogram for all these. I'm just going to write p-gram. Now, what type of angles do we have here? Yes, these are consecutive angles. So we're going to use the property of consecutive angles. Right? What is the formula for consecutive angles? Yes, Brian.
Blank plus blank equals 180.
Blank plus blank equals 180. So now, just like we did before, let's fill in these missing blanks. Does anyone think they can fill in the blanks for me? Anyone want to fill in the blanks for me? Yes, thank you. Plus question mark equals 180. Now, you don't have to use question mark. You could use x, y, z, but they gave us question mark. Why not use it? It's just a variable. And this is really, really easy to solve for. If I'm trying to figure out what question mark is by itself, I need to get it all alone. So we'll subtract 70 from both sides, and we get question mark equals 180. Or sorry, question mark equals 110. Sorry about that. Question mark equals 110 degrees. Any questions on that one? Any questions on that one? All right, so what I would like you guys to do is I would like you to pause the video and work on questions number 3. And then soon we'll move over and you guys can check out question number 4. So why don't you pause the video, try and fill in the format that we used, and answer the question. Now for this problem, we're going to work through it a little bit more quickly because it's very similar to one of the previous that we've done. Yes, these are consecutive. The reason that we know that they're consecutive is they're just right next to one another. Right? We can see that these two angles, again, right next to one another. So we have consecutive. Consecutive. So we're going to use that property. The formula we just said was blank plus blank equals 180. We fill in our blank as 80 plus question mark equals 180. Therefore, it's very easy to get. We subtract 80, question mark equals 100. Pretty easy there. And in fact, just for good practice, we're going to fill in all the angles. We know the angle across. What's angle X going to be? Angle X is also going to be 100. What's angle W going to be? Also 80. Very, very helpful. Opposite angles will always be congruent. Now let's go check out another one of these problems. All right, now you will notice that this diagram looks a little different than the previous because it has these extra lines drawn in. What do we call lines that connect vertices like this? Yes, Wendy? These are diagonals. We are working with the diagonals in these problems. So when we're working with diagonals, we know that diagonals have some very special properties inside of a parallelogram. In fact, we know that they bisect each other. Namely, we know this to be true. Now, we might not use all of that information, but it's better to write it down than not. So let's fill in our graph, or our diagram. We know that RT is 19 8/10. We're interested in finding out what RP equals. That's what we need to figure out. What other length do I need to know if I'm trying to figure out RP? What other length do I need to know? Yes?
RT.
If we need to know, what was that?
RT.
Yeah, we know RT. What other piece do we need to know in order to find RP? What's the other piece? TP, right? You see how it's that other portion. What do we know is true about RP and TP? They're the same. So this one also has to be 19 8/10. Any questions thus far about that? Perfect. Now, if we're interested in finding this whole length, which of the two formulas are we going to use? There's two formulas for this one. Yes, Darius? Part plus part equals whole. I'm going to shorten that as P plus P equals W. We're interested in the whole length from that segment addition postulate. So let's substitute in. What are the lengths of the parts? Can someone tell me? Yes. And? You got it. Equals W. So we combine our like terms, and it's what? 38 6/10 equals W. Because we know that this entire length, right here, is the sum of those two parts. Any questions about this one thus far? Yes?
How do you know if you
The question was asked, how do we know which equation to use? Because there's two equations, right? One is part equals part, and the other is, let me delete that. One is part equals part, and the other is part plus part equals whole, because we're working with bisection. The reason why we want to know, or want to use this formula, is because we're interested in finding RP. RP is the whole. Do you see how RP is the whole length here? That's why we want to use this portion. Excellent question. Good so far? Rock. Now, for number 8. Number 8, we're going to be combining a few of these properties. Again, we have a parallelogram. We've known that since the beginning. We've been given one of the angles, and we're asked to find a portion of this angle. Now, we don't know if this is bisected, so we can't just assume that this one is 52. But we can use some of the properties here. W and X are what type of angles? W and X are what type of angles? Yes. They're consecutive. So we're going to be working with consecutive angles. Consecutive angles. So, if we know W is 60, what does angle X have to be? Angle X is not going to be 60. They're not. If they were opposite, then yes, it would be 60. What do we know? What's the formula for consecutive angles? Yes.
plus blank equals 180.
Blank plus blank equals 180 because they're supplementary. So we know 60 plus x equals 180. Therefore, it's pretty easy math to see that x is 120 degrees. So this whole angle x is 120 degrees. Is there any questions about how angle x is 120 degrees? Oh, no, what's your question? Oh, yes, because we subtract 60 from both sides. We're not working with the 52 just yet. I was interested in what this whole angle is. Now, how can I use the 52 to figure? Yes. What's your question? Correct. They're not in the same triangle. This one is not. This is this whole angle. I'm talking this whole angle is 120. So, if I know this whole angle is 120 and this portion is 52, how can I figure out what the question mark is going to be? We would just subtract it. We'd find the difference. So we take our 120 and subtract 52 because that's going to tell us what this other portion is. So, guys, plug that in. Because one of you guys plug that in your calculator for me. Carry 1, 8. It is indeed 68 degrees. So our question mark is 68 degrees. Any questions on how that one is 68? We use the fact that consecutive integers add up, or consecutive angles add up to 180. 60 plus 120 is 180 because they're consecutive. I knew a portion of this angle was going to be 52, so I just had to figure out the difference. Yes, any questions on that? Yes. X is 100. The angle x is 120. This angle x is 120. 68 is what the question mark is, so what they're asking for. And that's what you have to be careful of, is what question are they really asking for. All right, so with this video, what we've seen is illustrating the first 4 properties in a very, very basic skill level. We're just setting up the simple equation and solving. With our next video, we're actually going to be looking at expressions and plugging in expressions like 10x plus 5, 3x plus 10, stuff like that, and then solving for x. So there's going to be one additional step in those next ones. But I wanted you guys to at least be able to see how we choose what property we're going to use, because more importantly, it's about figuring out which formula you're going to be using. Thank you. Make sure you check out the next video on parallelograms and their advanced properties.